Math is an absolute. Art and design isn't. So when you use digital tools, you have to remember you're working with a computer based on math. And when you use the alignment tools in Illustrator, you don't always want to accept the results they produce. In this movie, I want to show you how to align design elements in your logo motifs based off of good optics, not merely mathematical algorithms. So let me demonstrate a problem within Illustrator, and that is I'm going to show you how the math is absolutely perfect and correct, actually, but it's not design correct. So if we take this little mark of a happy little sheriff badge type star, and I want to float it in the middle of this shape, if I select this shape, I can isolate this one by holding Option and clicking on it, and you can see how it highlights it. Then I can go up to Alignment and align it to the center of this. And what it produces is this. This isn't what we want, but it's actually technically or mathematically, that is, correct. This is mathematical alignment to both of these shapes, but visually or optically, it's not correct. And so we want to undo that. So we'll bring it out over here. Now, if you're building a design, and the reason I bring this up is in the context of creating a design, in the process of creating a design, you might think of something and it moves you in a slightly different direction that you didn't think of in your ideation stage. And in this case, you might build content before you realize you want to add something else. I created this element before I realized I wanted to put a shape around it. And so it makes it really tricky to try to center a star shape like this on a circle like this in Illustrator. There is no easy way to do it. So if you can plan ahead, you can do it if you know ahead of time that you want to do it by going to the shape tool, going to the star. And when you have a shape like this circle, it'll have a center point. And as long as you're on the center point and you start there, you can build a shape that centers correctly onto the given shape behind it. You just have to know ahead of time that that's what you want to do. And if I would have done that, this is how I would have built it to make sure that it's centered correctly. So how do we center this star on this shape after the fact? How do you do that? Well, once again, there is no easy way to do it, but there is a plugin that does it. And here's the beauty. This plugin is absolutely free. And once again, it's by astutegraphics.com. So make sure to go grab it. It's called the Subscribe plugin. And that's these elements right here that I'm highlighting. We're going to deal with this one, which is a circle with these 3 points in it. And I'm going to demonstrate how this works. We're going to select this artwork, and with this tool selected, we're going to click on one anchor point. You can see the 1 showing up there. We're going to click on the second one, 2, and we're going to click and pull to a third anchor point, which is this one, and release. And what that creates is, let's color it differently. So we'll go to Graphic Styles and Stroke and make sure it's there. And you can see it's centered this circular shape. Now we can just from the center out, increase it. I can select this shape, group it, go here, select this, focus on it by holding Option down, and then align it with the alignment tool. And you can see it's now perfectly centered, and I can get rid of that initial shape. So that's how I use that plugin in order to create the designs I need in order to align things that might not be perfectly aligned. Then I can bring in type, select this type, focus on it, and symmetrically align it to this to get a final logo design. So that's how I would use alignment method tools such as provided by Astute to do that. But this brings up the whole aspect of mathematical alignment as to optically align something. And I want to go over that now. So we have these 2 marks for a company called Heartfelt. They're a social media company, and these are 2 brand marks developed for that. This is their logo type. Once again, it's a modular system, and I want to align these graphics with this type. So we're wanting to create a vertical mark here. So I'm going to select the type, focus on it by holding Option and clicking the type, and then I'm going to center it. And we'll do the same thing for the bottom one. focus on the type, and center it. Now, these are mathematically correct, meaning these are exactly where they should be according to the numbers of math. But optically, I don't think they look that great in terms of the optics. I think we can improve the visual appearance of them. And on this one, it's not so bad. It's pretty close because this shape is almost a symmetric type of shape. We're just going to ever so slightly move it over just a little bit. And I think it balances better with the whole, with the logo type. We're going to go down to this one. And if I select this one, and I select the type, you can see mathematically these spaces on each side there and there are even, so it's mathematically aligned, but it looks like it's leaning to the left, or it's heavy on the left and light on the right. That's because we have this big white area here. So math doesn't take into account the negative space. So what we're going to do is we're going to improve the readability of this mark by sliding this over. We'll do it right about there. And I think this balances far better now than what we had previously. So that's all there is to it when it comes to mathematical alignment and optical alignment. It's about balancing the whole and making it work better. So if we look at this design here, the ones on the left are the mathematically precise ones, and the ones on the right are the optically precise ones, the ones that balance better, that is. So keep that in mind as you're composing your layouts for your various logo iterations. Now, here's another example. We have this nice brand mark up here. We have the type for the mark down here. And if I select both, and I focus by holding Option down and clicking the type on the type, and I align it to the center like this, you can see we have the same spaces on each side, and it's mathematically perfect. But when I bring it down, it's kind of hanging to the left a little bit. It's weighted down too much in terms of hanging to the left. And I think we can actually make this a little more compelling by adjusting it a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring this over, and we're going to align it right about there. And I think what we're going to, actually, I think it can go down just a little bit even more. I think that is going to work far better for the final design. So is the math correct? Well, no. In the math, it says, this is way too far to the right, but optically, it's balanced and it works well. So that's kind of the trade-off you're going to have to do. You're going to have to visually look at it and make these kind of decisions. Now, this is also where subjectivity comes into the design process, because some of you might be looking at this and going, well, I liked it the way it was before. And that's where your own prerogative is going to come in. I happen to think it looks better this way. You might disagree and want to go the other way. It's not that one is right or wrong, but I tend to lean more heavily on the optical alignment as being the right way, because once it feels right, I feel it is right. And that's what I'm striving for. And in this brand system, this is what I ultimately ended up working out for all the various iterations. Let's take a look at another one. Here's one for a skincare product called Nourish. And when you have a mark like this is a very symmetric mark. So let's say this type is the way it's supposed to be symmetrically. I could focus on this, holding Option down, clicking the type, and aligning it right in the center. And it's going to be perfectly centered on this type because the type itself is symmetric. This is easy to align. But when it comes to creating a horizontal format, if I select the same type, focus on it and align it, and do this, it's going to be too heavy towards the bottom because all it's taking into account in terms of the alignment is the top edge and the bottom edge. It doesn't count all the negative space. And because this is very light at the top, it's very heavy at the bottom, so it can't really hang down that far. We want to handle this better. We want to balance the look and feel of this better. And to help us in this respect, this is where I'll drag down guides, and I'll do this to establish the top and the bottom where the type is. Then I'll drag my mark out, then I'll drag it back in, and I'll just see where it aligns and just use this to kind of guide me. And in this case, actually, let's drag it out this way and then drag it back. In this case, I think that looks pretty good. We can get rid of our lines and maybe bump it over a little bit, like that. And that's how I would align this mark to balance it out. Is it mathematically balanced? No, it's way off mathematically. You got all this space and just a little space down here, but optically it looks balanced. It looks like it's going to work well. And the full brand system for this design looked like this. Now, there's another trick when I'm working with a design that's a modular format like this, and it comes down to the point where I'm building it. And sometimes when I create iterations of logos, I might have the same brand graphic element, but the type changes for different contexts of usage. This is very true with the larger branding project, and in which case the client wants the type to remain editable, meaning in a font format. Like this one, we're using Chalet for this typeface. And because of the way fonts are designed, some are produced really well, and the container box that holds the type is somewhat centered, and it's not a big problem. This one isn't a huge problem because it's balanced pretty well, and the font's been manufactured really well in terms of the production of the actual vectors that is contained in it. So if we select this and select our brand mark and we focus on it by holding the option down and align it horizontally speaking, it looks halfway decent, but there's a couple problems here. And one problem is this mark is heavily weighed up at the top because of this shooting off. I actually want to align it based off of this edge, and this doesn't matter. I don't want that to play into the equation of alignment. So how would I do this? Well, I'll show you one way I do it quickly is I take type like this and I'll clone it, Command-C, Command-F. And so we'll do that here, and then I'll convert it to paths. Now to convert type to paths, just go to type, and you can go to create outlines right here. You can see I have a keyboard command I've been using for about 20 years that goes back to the freehand days that I have assigned to it. So I can just hit my freehand command, and I get the type. We're going to ungroup it, and then I'm just going to toss everything but this letter O. Then I'm just going to size it, and this letter O is going to be our sizer. And what I usually do is I fill it with nothing and have no stroke on it, so you can't see it, but it's there, and then I'll group these together. So it's going to base my alignment off of this large space that I know is right in the center of what I want to be the center point of this design. That way, I can center it a lot easier. Another thing I'll do is I'll go over to this design. I'll grab a piece of it, like this inner circle. I'll copy it, and then I'll paste it in place, and I'll go do the same thing I did with my type, like this. And then I'll select my type with this other one, focus on this shape on the left, and then I'll align it. And so now my type is perfectly aligned the way I want it to. And that's like, it's kind of a dirty little trick to pull this off, but that's literally how I do this kind of alignment. It just kind of works easier. It makes the whole process easier. Now on this one, I'm going to select this, copy and paste it, bring it down here. And actually, once I'm done using this, I'll go in and delete that, and of course, delete this one too. So when I give the project to a client, if they want editable type, this is what I would provide to them. I'd group it so it's one element, and then they can click in using isolation mode as shown here and edit the type to whatever they want it to be. And yes, this is a fake logo. There is no Techno Pizza. I don't even know what Techno Pizza is. I just like this mark I created. I was in the process of creating a logo and just started playing around with shapes and came up with this. So I'm using it for this movie to demonstrate this. The next thing I want to do is I want to create a way to align it with type such as this where I've stacked it. And all I've done here is I find a basis for the type here, which is this bottom left anchor point. So I'm going to click and drag a rectangle up to the flat part of the N. And that will be an alignment shape I'm going to use for this. Once again, fill it with nothing. So it's there. Then I'll select these. Actually, I don't even need to group those. I'll select this with the alignment shape. And then I'll select this alignment shape, and now it'll align it based off of this rectangular shape I created. So I can move this over, and what this does is it bases it off of the circular shape in this motif, not the extended part. Now, one thing I noticed when I did this was I actually didn't like this, even though it's mathematically perfect now in terms of this type matching up with this, or optically aligned, that is. I think this is something that in the process of designing, you discover things that, hey, that would actually work better. And I think that's the case here. I actually thought if I snapped this anchor point to the top of this A, the reason why I'm doing that is notice I have this negative space running through these two words. I want it to continue through the shape. So it's what I call contour continuation. And I think it actually works better if I handle this layout this way. I think you get a better result, and I group it. And this would be the artwork I send to the client. So when it comes to design, there's a lot about it that's discovery. You can try to pre-plan things as well as you can, but in the process of building, you're going to discover little things like that that actually work better. And it's smart to be open to that, because that's what leads to some really clever and unique designs as you're working. So computers are great. I love the digital workflow. But when it comes to good design, you can't let a machine steer the graphic ship, as it were. You have to override tool-driven methodology and improve a logo composition with the designer's eye to find the optical sweet spot that works best.